I think it's really important to acknowledge that my journey with mental health and mental illness started long before my own struggles, and I was a caregiver for my mom with schizoaffective disorder long before my own diagnosis. This tattoo says the toughest battles are fought in the mind, and the reason for that was I felt like everything I had been through was a battle, and I was working so hard to get to the place that I'm at now, and it felt like I was getting constantly pushed back. And this was really meant to be a representation that even though I looked like I was doing very well on the outside, I was really struggling on the inside. When me and Allison met, I was fairly neurotypical. I didn't have any of the symptoms that I have today, and so she's always been there through my journey. And it was in my first year of college that I started having my own symptoms of psychosis. I started experiencing hallucinations, delusions, paranoia. Because you knew me, like before I had symptoms, what were the first things you noticed when I started having symptoms? Because I went from a very like outgoing, chatty person, and
Yeah, you always have been really outgoing and kind of expressive, and I noticed a lot more flat, kind of monotone. I would ask you a question, you would respond with things that weren't logical to the conversation.
after these symptoms started, I found myself really falling apart. I lost my job. I had to drop out of college. This quickly led to me trying to find ways to cope. And because I didn't have the resources that I needed, that led to me self-medicating, using drugs. And so I fell into addiction.
But it was really scary that whole time because I watched you go from someone who's really motivated and had goals set for college and is really expressive and kind of light up the room whenever you walk in to just kind of maybe more blank and, like I said, just kind of absent.
After struggling with my addiction for several years, it eventually led to me being incarcerated. That's what led to a lot of my issues, being able to seek help early on and ask for help when I was incarcerated. It became very difficult for me to get help because at that point, everything I did was kind of tied to the legal system and the justice system. So it's unfortunately really common for people with mental illness to end up in a very similar situation.
So I think while jail was scary at first because you're so social, I think you used that as an opportunity to, maybe that's where your advocacy journey might have started.
I think it's also when I started identifying that I might need help, even though I didn't recognize I had schizophrenia yet. I think I started to be more aware that like I couldn't do what everyone else was able to do. I finally thought maybe you or mom could help me a little bit, and I didn't know that you guys were already more aware of it than I was. I was really fortunate that Allison and my mom had gathered these resources for me when I finally reached out for help. And I was able to get in to see a doctor immediately, and that doctor was able to refer me to a psychiatrist. As soon as I got a diagnosis, I was able to start medication, and I started having less hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia, but I was having more ability to understand what was going on around me.
So you remember when we first started hiking kind of after your diagnosis?
Yeah, that was like the first time I got used to like being outside again, and we started getting in public, and I started seeing friends, and we started bringing friends on hikes. So that was really kind of what integrated me back into society a little bit. After my diagnosis and my medication, I still felt very embarrassed with the idea of being out in public and in front of people because I did have issues with speech, and I had a lot of cognitive issues. Just me getting out and getting in nature was the first step to me being able to really feel comfortable outside of the house again. It was like starting from square one, and I had to rebuild relationships, I had to try to find a job, and all of these things I was doing while trying to remember how to act. Treatment was such a big part of my journey because my medication is what gave me clarity almost immediately after my diagnosis, and that's what led to me being able to do all of the things I do now. But medication can look different person to person, and it can be a very individualized experience. For a long time, what worked best for me was oral medication, but as my goals evolved and my life changed, I found that long-acting injections actually gave me a little more freedom. I thought I had lost the life that I was living, and I got to start a foundation for a new life and new experiences and finding myself as a person who was living with mental illness. So this tattoo is a symbol of not only a very dark place that I came out of, but also the journey it took to get to where I am today, and the battles I fought and the people who were there beside me, the people who helped me find stability, start taking medication, the people who got me to a point where I could accept help. And so this tattoo, it's not just ink, it's a story of hope and it's a story of endurance, and hopefully for some patients out there, it's a story of a bright future.